Continuing our series on the Cities of Sigmar, today we're going to explore the Darkling Covens, units that made up the bulk of what we knew then as the Dark Elves from the Old World, and explore how they've kind of traversed into Age of Sigmar and how they fit into this new fantasy setting. As with all of these sub-factions within the Cities of Sigmar book, it's important to understand the army's core lore. So in the description down below, there are links to the playlist for Cities of Sigmar. Watching the first video or two would be really helpful for you to understand kind of the background of where these factions are coming from. And so, I'll leave that down there. I'm going to fast forward past that. The term Darkling Coven is a very broad term expression describing a myriad of elven cults, warrior enclaves, and witch covens that entered into Azir during the time of the Great Retreat from the Realms. The main story of Cities of Sigmar is that Sigmar said he was going to close the gates to Azir. People of all races and creeds poured in. Once the doors were sealed, there was this cleansing meant to purge Azir of any chaos corruption. And then all these disparate factions came together and started collaborating on a plan for reconquest, right? Working together to establish what we now know as the Cities of Sigmar as a unified army made up of different sub-factions and races and that kind of thing. And all of that was going along at the same time that Sigmar was busy building his Stormcast Eternals. But the Darkling Covens are an interesting little asterisk on all of that. They didn't fit into the mold of the other races and cooperated. When Azir went into its, isolated lockdown, a number of elven mystics and witches and warriors immediately slumped into the shadows, distancing themselves from the greater populace. The absolute easiest way I could think to explain it is imagine all these people are, they're relocating and collaborating, cross-species borders, that kind of stuff, but some folks sneak away and form tiny little gangs. A small group that is very intense about making sure their own needs and interests are well met. Collectively, they can lend services to aid others, like offering soldiers for war, but they aren't quite your buddy, even though they can be on your side. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, Doug, Darkling Covens are way too big to be thought of as this little gang. What I'm saying is that's how I believe they started. Hundreds of years of growth, when the gates of Azir were locked, and intrigue has seen them rise in power and size. So think of these humble beginnings of something like a sorceress who still wants to practice her rituals and religious services without the prying eye of inquisitors or witch hunters on behalf of Sigmar looking to purge anything that they think is impure. Combined with elven warriors whose possibly prejudice or arrogance doesn't lend itself to collaboration with other races or ideals. But then all of those things are put together and magnified with time. And these little gangs begin to form large power bases, and that's exactly what we would call the Darkling Covens. They exist in grand alliances of order, but they aren't the good guys. These are the dark shades of Cities of Sigmar, just like every other army has a dark shade to it, dealing and trading in information and persuasion. The Darkling Covens have amassed a powerful military empire within the scattered Cities of Sigmar. They are also the spies and information brokers in the extreme. And the captivating spells of the sorceress, who is always the leader, has enraptured the mind of many politicians, military advisors, and more. Behind that soft combat, like spies and persuasion and that kind of stuff, there really is true military might. Ranks of warriors trained in brutally efficient use of spears and swords and all kinds of weapons. And this is what makes them so powerful within the Cities of Sigmar, and why seemingly an evil faction is allowed to exist, is that they can meet your every need. You need information? They either have it or can get it. Need to change the mind of a politician? The sorceress can enrapture them absolutely. Do you need some additional military might to go conquer an area? The Darkling Covens are for hire. It almost writes itself, right? You can almost see all of the politicking of people in authority all thinking, I don't like these people, I don't trust them, but when I need X done, there's no better person to call. That shady underbelly that kind of exists. This faction really represents that. Now, as far as structure goes, there's not a ton of detail, which I actually like. It kind of keeps it mysterious and allows you to, form your own. We do know that a sorceress is always at the top, but how that relates to military advisors and trainers and all this kinds of stuff is kind of a mystery. And I love when there's a single leader at the top of a faction because, if you can create a compelling background for that single hero, it really does shape the feel of the entire faction. And the sorceress as a unit is super compelling, right? To have that character at the top makes it very easy to jump in with creating your army's lore. They don't do their magics in Azir or the cities a whole lot, right? They gotta keep all of this on the down low. But when they do go to battle, they can unleash hell itself. You got arcane fire, bolts of lightning, and life-draining spells all firing out of the palm of a screaming elf lady coming at you with a dagger. When she tires and her power starts to wane, she'll happily slaughter one of her own men, steal their life force, and use it to power her shadow magic even further. And while the sorceress is the undisputed leader of the coven, the bulk of it functions just like its very own free guild army, meaning, like I said before, this is a private army. Dreadspears hold the line with, spears and shields, while bleak swords engage in counteroffensives, all while dark shards shower the enemy in highly accurate crossbow fire. In addition to that, the Blackguard acts as a personal fighting force and entourage of the sorceress, or really anyone they deem important, and they plow deep into the battle line so she can unleash her spells to deadly effect. One thing that I found actually quite humorous was the tiny little entry that executioners got, right? They fight alongside the Darkling Covens, but they don't really fit anywhere into their military structure. No one orders them around, they just kind of show up, and they're just these living blenders that just love killing. They reside in isolated towers where none but executioners can enter. They rarely speak. They don't seem to explain why they lend their aid to the Darkling Covens. There's a bunch of theories listed, like they're, worshippers of an aspect of Cain, or there's something about the masks, but they're just kind of there. Now that is the general lore for the sub-faction. Again, none of these sub-factions are hugely massive. They have tons of lore about them, nothing like that. They're all part of a greater whole. So why do I think the Darkling Covens in particular are cool? I, for one, love these guys, right? The Cities of Sigmar are not immune to petty politics and maneuverings, and because that exists, there's a void that this kind of faction fills, right? Spies, warriors, smugglers, assassins, that kind of thing. They can work at all levels of society. They can, if you have the money, they'll loan you out a couple units of dudes to go fight with you and help you secure your property, and either you pay them a handsome fee or, they get some kind of rights of ownership or a land deal, that kind of thing, which just further increases their power base. Or, if you need subtlety, things like persuasion magics to, beguile people and change their minds, as well as just have dirt on people and blackmail them. They work at all levels of society, from the basic grunt warrior all the way up to the lofty politician. And they work for all these other factions, right? They can be hired out because, on the front, their front-facing side, it's very respectable, or at least respectable enough, right, to be accepted within society, but they can do their dark deeds of that society because of their lack of morals. Everything's done in the shadows. They have outposts in all major cities. They foster influence and power from the darkness and just dodging Sigmar's witch hunters and inquisitors. This is political intrigue at its best, and they can back that up financially with having a private army. Or if things are ever falling down on one front, like, oh man, people aren't hiring a lot of spies, they still have a private army they can loan out, and make money that way. They've diversified enough what they're good at to survive just about anything. And it's interesting because I didn't really expect them to go down this route when I saw that the book was coming out. I really thought they would be more almost like the Free Guild, because they have a whole bunch of units that are very numerous in terms of body count. There's a lot of, your basic spear guys, your basic sword guys, and guys with the crossbows is really what it is. A lot of dudes. If you're going to have a Darkling Covens army, it would be very high model count, no doubt. But when they leaned into in the lore is that, that exists for a very practical reason, to give them a reason to be tolerated, but really what they do, the main arc of this subfaction is, the spying and the doing things in shadows and having fell rites that Sigmar would not approve of, even though they're not directly chaos or anything like that. They're just blood sacrifice and that kind of stuff that what we would normally call order doesn't really like, for the same reasons that Morathi and the Daughters of Cain do a lot of their stuff in private as well. It makes them feel sufficiently elfy and dark enough, but also just the fact that they have things that can be hired out and they meet the needs of some nefarious people gives them a reason to be in these cities. Truth be told, I thought it was a really cool sub-faction, and I'd love to know more about them, especially seeing them like kind of operate. If there was a book that was like, I don't know, Gangs of New York style, but with Darkling Covens as one of them, I think that would be really stinking cool. So anyway, tell me your thoughts in the comments down below. I'll follow up there. Thank you all so much for watching and listening, and I'll catch you next time in my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Thank you and happy wargaming.